When Jermaine Zellman headed into the sea off the coast of Northern California with her paddleboard, she looked forward to spending time on the water without her best friend Ashley. But a quick morning paddle soon turned into a terrifying experience. Jermaine, an 87-year-old grandmother, lived far from her children and grandchildren. Only one of her children resided nearby, working for a construction company in a city near California. Nearly 50 years ago, Jermaine's husband had died in a car accident, leaving her to raise their children alone. Despite the tragedy, she remained focused on her career at an accounting firm and raising her children, opting not to remarry. After retiring, contentment settled in, but loneliness lingered. It wasn't until her friend Ashley visited one day and reintroduced her to swimming that Jermaine found solace. In her youth, she had been an avid swimmer, but the demands of marriage and motherhood had sidelined her hobby. Now, in her golden years, she and Ashley, also in her 80s, made regular trips to the beach to swim and enjoy each other's company. On a calm spring day, Jermaine set out for her morning swim. The day before, Ashley informed her that she had traveled out of California to care for her ill son, leaving Jermaine to swim alone. After her customary morning prayer, Jermaine went to the beach. She changed into her swimsuit and waded into the water. She swam with the grace of someone who had spent a lifetime in the water, relishing the sensation of weightlessness and freedom. After completing 2 laps, she decided to swim a third before basking in the sun's warmth on the shore. Jermaine always followed the coast's rules, staying within the designated swim boundaries. However, fate had other plans for her. On that serene morning, Jermaine relished the sensation of the cool water enveloping her body. As she prepared to return to shore, a piercing scream escaped her lips, echoing across the beach. Her cry pierced through the tranquil atmosphere, alerting other early morning swimmers to the danger lurking beneath the surface. Unbeknownst to Jermaine, a massive great white shark had spotted her amidst her playful splashing. Oblivious to the impending danger, she continued to enjoy her swim until she felt a sudden excruciating pain shoot through her thigh. The attack came swift and unexpected, catching her off guard. The commotion drew the attention of onlookers on the shore, who fixed their gazes on the older woman struggling in the water. Jermaine fought against the predator's relentless grip with remarkable resilience, refusing to succumb to its deadly jaws. Despite her age and fragility, Jermaine summoned every ounce of strength and determination to survive. The shark, intent on claiming its prey, tightened its hold, threatening to tear away flesh from bone. Meanwhile, fishermen returning from an early morning expedition spotted the unfolding drama. Ignoring their fatigue, they steered their vessel towards Jermaine's location, prepared to confront the difficult situation head-on. As the boat neared, one of the fishermen armed himself with a harpoon, its tip laced with a tranquilizer to incapacitate the predator. He launched the dart towards the menacing shark with steady aim, striking it true. The tranquilizer took effect, rendering the shark powerless as it relinquished its hold on Jermaine. Without hesitation, one of the fishermen dove into the water, swiftly reaching the injured woman's side. Together, they hoisted Jermaine onto the safety of the fishing vessel, their actions fueled by a sense of urgency and compassion. They also forgot to claim the shark, which was an unexpected prize for helping out Jermaine. The boat raced towards the shore, its engine roaring as it cut through the waves. Upon reaching land, Jermaine was swiftly transferred into the care of waiting paramedics, summoned by concerned beachgoers who had witnessed the harrowing ordeal. At the hospital, Jermaine underwent emergency treatment for puncture and laceration wounds to her upper right thigh. The medical team worked diligently to stitch the gaping wound, providing her with the necessary care and support for her recovery. News of Jermaine's harrowing encounter spread rapidly throughout the community, sparking conversations about the resilience of the human spirit and the importance of shark awareness. Her survival became a testament to the strength and tenacity of the human will, inspiring others to remain vigilant in the face of adversity. Amidst the flurry of activity, Jermaine's children rushed to her side, their hearts filled with relief at the sight of their beloved mother alive and relatively unharmed. They showered her with gifts and expressions of gratitude, thankful for her miraculous survival. Despite the traumatic experience, Jermaine's love for the ocean remained unshaken. Once she had fully recovered, she returned to the beach, undeterred by the memories of that fateful day. With each visit, she embraced the beauty of the sea, a testament to her unwavering resilience and indomitable spirit. Dive deep into this heart-pounding collection of shark attack stories, which will leave you on the edge of your seat. From great white sharks to tiger and bull sharks, these apex predators claim the lives and limbs of these victims who unwittingly ventured into the shark-infested domains. From the sun-drenched shores of California to the murky depths of remote reefs, these tales transcend mere tragedy to explore the complex interplay between humanity and the deep blue sea. Brace yourself for a journey through fear, resilience, and the unyielding spirit of those who dared venture into shark-infested territory. The morning sun glistened off the crystal blue waters of El Porto Beach as Mark and his 12-year-old son Tyler carried their surfboards toward the shoreline. It was a warm summer Saturday, and the beach was already crowded with families looking to enjoy the perfect surf conditions. As Mark helped Tyler strap on his leash, he spotted a woman named Jen paddling her green kayak just past the breaking waves. He'd often noticed the pretty blonde around the beach and marina. An avid kayaker and marine enthusiast, she typically kept to herself. After going over some last-minute surfing tips, Mark and Tyler charged into the water side by side, powering their way through the waves until they could paddle out back. The waves were running 4-6 feet, perfect for Mark to continue teaching his son. About 200 yards offshore, Jen floated peacefully in her kayak, occasionally dunking her face mask into the water to glimpse at the underwater scenery. She spied a few harmless leopard sharks gliding along the sandy bottom, and felt completely at ease. Tyler faced some initial difficulties, but with determination, he gradually mastered the timing for paddling and rising to his feet on the surfboard. Mark, observing Tyler's progress, expressed his pride and encouragement as Tyler successfully caught his first wave of the day, gliding smoothly toward the shore. Unknown to the surfers and kayakers, a massive 16-foot great white shark lurked beneath the surface, drawn by the commotion and splashing. With its beady black eyes fixated and its sleek white belly slicing through the water, the predator honed in on its unsuspecting prey. Mark sat calmly on his board, letting a few waves go by as he waited for a good set to ride in. Just then, a gray blur began rapidly overtaking him from the rear. Tyler had paddled back out and was cheering when suddenly, without warning, the great white's gaping jaw clamped around the back half of Mark's body, crunching through bone and sinew as easily as scissors through cotton. A thick crimson cloud immediately choked his agonizing scream as the shark's serrated teeth tore him in half. Tyler wailed hysterically, frozen in shock and horror as the thrashing shark tossed Mark's mutilated torso through the air like a chew toy. Within seconds, the reddening water kept frothing as the great white shook its head violently side to side, swallowing the remains. Jen stared in disbelief towards the sound of the anguished screaming, just in time to see the ominous slick of blood and butchered human remains spreading out from the feeding frenzy. Before she could process what was happening, the great white had spotted her flailing arms from its initial attack and rapidly beelined towards her next. Powering forward with incredible speed, the massive shark launched its entire body over the surface. Its jaw was wide open as it crashed down upon Jen's kayak, shattering it to pieces with its immense weight and strength. The force of the impact knocked Jen underwater, stunned but still conscious, just as the shark spun around to finish her off. A cloud of red drifted through the water as Jen squeezed her eyes shut, feeling the excruciating snap of her legs being torn from her body. She immediately began choking on her own blood, gurgling helplessly as the great white thrashed and spun through the kill, shredding flesh and bone until little remained of her lower body. As the metallic taste saturated her mouth, she forced her eyes open in time to see the shark's cold black eyes staring into hers for a final chilling moment before it bit down through her torso, mercifully sending her into permanent darkness. On the surface, the sounds of joyful laughter and crashing waves were suddenly drowned by the piercing screams of the beachgoers, finally realizing what was transpiring offshore. Tyler was beside himself, shrieking uncontrollably through choked sobs for his father, amid the chaos of hundreds of people desperately rushing out of the bloodied ocean. The great white sensed the fresh rush of thrashing activity and pivoted toward its next target. Already well fed from the gruesome double kill, but now aggressively hunting, it sliced through the water straight for the panicking crowd. At the shoreline, parents shielded their children and lifeguards blew shrill whistles toward the remaining surfers, swimmers, and kayakers to exit the water immediately. But the backpedaling frenzy of people ultimately attracted the great white-like swirling chum in the water. The tightly clustered circle of flailing legs and churning water proved an irresistible target for the ancient predator as it torpedoed a group of surfers trying frantically to escape. With a huge spray of water exploding into the air, the bloodthirsty shark emerged, maws open wide, devouring one unlucky surfer in a swift, deadly motion. Pieces of surfboards, flesh and bones rained across the waves as the rest of the surfers managed to make it back to the beach, along with all the other petrified swimmers and ocean enthusiasts. The churning red waters and the ultimate disappearance of the satiated shark did little to slow the sounds of crying, screaming, and sheer terror that had overtaken the scene. Over the next few days, the shocking attack resulting in 3 fatalities drew worldwide news coverage. Theories abounded about what could have triggered such an unprecedented bloodbath from a great white in a heavily populated area. Heated debates popped up about measures to prevent future attacks, including culling of local shark populations. Throughout it all, local marine biologist Danny Crowder felt torn over the senseless loss of life, but knew the importance of calmly educating the public on the very rare odds of such an attack and the nature of sharks, who primarily avoided interactions with humans. As gut-wrenching as it was, she worried that a panicked, knee-jerk response could ultimately harm the ecosystem sharks helped maintain balance within. So Danny took to the media outlets with sympathy for the victims and loved ones, but with a firm stance that the great white attack was an anomaly of nature, not an indiscriminate rampage to be avenged. She advocated for strategies of prevention, detection, and public awareness, instead of protecting vulnerable beach areas, and for shark mitigation only as a last resort. The visceral images of the attack were certain to haunt the community, but Danny hoped measured responses could keep both humans and sharks in the ocean safely. With clarity and respect for the tragic yet natural events that had unfolded at El Porto, hopefully, calmer minds would ultimately prevail, while still ensuring proper precautions to minimize potential risks of future attacks. The sun beat down on the rugged coast of Hawke's Bay, New Zealand. Even in the early hours of March 12, 2001, the air held a heavy heart, promising a sweltering day. Not that Keon Marshall minded. It was a perfect day for the first Deep Blue Challenge event, and he was buzzing with excitement and nerves. Keon, all wiry muscle and easy confidence, wasn't one to shy away from a challenge. Even at 42, his life revolved around pushing boundaries, trail running through the mountains, surfing the gnarliest waves. And now this, competing in one of the country's newest extreme sports events. He stood on the shore, watching the other competitors prep for the deep-sea dive. They were a mix of adrenaline junkies and conservationists. This whole challenge firmly focused on promoting awareness of the region's marine life, especially the sharks. Hawke's Bay was a prime spot for several species, including great whites, a fact that fascinated and scared many of the competitors. Keon respected the power of these creatures but wasn't dominated by fear. The organizers had stressed safety measures, but the ocean was wild and unpredictable. He pushed away a twinge of doubt. He loved this, testing his limits against the power of nature. He turned back to his gear, meticulously checking his oxygen tanks one last time. Sarah, his wife, approached. They'd been together since they were teens. She knew him better than anyone. Her support of his adventures was unwavering, even if it meant sleepless nights on her part. He gave her a reassuring smile before slipping into the water. His heart swelled warmly as he watched his kids, Maya and Zach, playing on the sand. His family, the reason he was even more cautious these days. He wouldn't take stupid risks, not with them counting on him. A chill crept into the water as he descended into the deep blue. His fellow divers shimmered around him, and the dive team closely monitored them. Keon spotted Sarah waving on the support boat. This was the awareness the challenge emphasized. These ocean predators were magnificent, not mindless monsters. Then it happened. A large shadow drifted behind him out of sight. A ripple of unease passed through him, a predator's instinct kicking in. Suddenly he felt it, a jarring impact, a crushing pressure on his leg. And then the unbearable searing pain. Panic exploded through Kian. It was a shark, and it wasn't letting go. He thrashed, kicking unthinkingly, but the creature's grip was like a vice grip wrench. Pain seared through him as its teeth tore into his lower leg. His blood mingled with the seawater, a hazy cloud attracting other sharks. Through a haze of adrenaline and terror, he thought of his family on the shore, the life he loved. A surge of desperate strength fueled him. Somehow he reached for his dive knife, stabbing at the shark, forcing it to loosen its grip briefly. Just those few seconds, he bought him time. The other divers materialized, shouting and wielding their knives, forcing the beast to retreat. Then the agonizing ascent. The dive team dragged him upwards, his shredded leg leaving a crimson trail. They hauled him onto the boat, and reality crashed down in agonizing waves. The gaping wound, bone and ligament exposed, the blood that wouldn't seem to stop. Someone wrapped a tourniquet tight, a blessed numbness starting to creep in as shock threatened to take over. Sarah was at his side before he knew it. Her face, white with fear, swam in and out of his focus. The boat raced back to shore, the paramedics a blur of activity around him. Then the gut-wrenching moment when the surgeon explained the extent of the damage. The leg would have to be amputated below the knee. The days that followed were a nightmare. Physical recovery was excruciating. Phantom pains haunted his sleep, and waves of nausea washed over him as he grappled with the reality of permanent disability. He pushed Sarah away, guilt and anger gnawing at him. This was his fault. His need for adventure had turned their world upside down. His dreams of surfing with his kids seemed cruelly impossible. The dark thoughts wouldn't stop. But Sarah stood firm. She held his hand as he adjusted to the new normal, to the wheelchair and the grueling physical therapy. When Kian raged at the world, she silently absorbed it, a quiet strength he desperately needed. His children climbed on his lap, their questions innocent and heartbreaking. He held them close, vowing that this wouldn't break him. Time didn't erase the scars, but it did soften them. The support group he'd resisted at first became a lifeline, people who understood the unique trauma of a shark attack. Kian found himself drawn back to the ocean he'd once feared. Not to dive, not yet, but simply to sit and watch. The waves were indifferent to his pain, but their power and beauty reminded him of the life he still had. News reports of the attack had painted him as the victim of the tragedy. Kian wanted to change that narrative. He began to speak at events, raising awareness about sharks and advocating for safety in extreme sports. He shared his story not to evoke pity but to inspire, to show that even from the darkest depths, you could still rise. It was a slow, arduous journey back. The ocean would always hold a tinge of danger now, but he'd learned that true bravery didn't lie in the absence of fear, but in confronting it. With Sarah by his side and the kids cheering him on, he fitted his prosthetic leg. He returned to the waves not as a diver but as a surfer, finding a new way to dance with the ocean's power. He became a fierce advocate for shark conservation, a fighter, just like the creatures that had forever changed his life. A dedicated night surfer, Lucas Mendez felt his soul tugged by the surf on a calm beach in Brazil. Lucas, 28, loved the ocean's gentle lapping against his board and found peace in the lap of the waves. He was a seasoned surfer with a lean body and years of experience in the water. But tonight, a strange unease crept in as he paddled under the moonlight. Lucas's board glided effortlessly through the water, and the moon cast a silver trail before him. While balancing himself to catch the perfect wave, his mind wandered back to his grandfather João, who taught him how to respect the ocean. With a twinkle of wisdom in his eyes, João Mendez would tell him, "The ocean is your friend and foe." The sound of waves breaking in the distance was all that could be heard, along with the occasional nightbird call. Lucas caught a big wave and felt the adrenaline rush every time he flew along the water. As he was about to see another wave return to the shore, his leg was suddenly jerked by a sharp, sudden tug. Panic erupted in his chest as he felt a mighty shark's grip. The attack was quick. Lucas struggled with all his strength as the shark's teeth penetrated his leg. His fists were driven by survival instinct as he punched the shark's rough skin. The shark let go of him after what seemed like an eternity. Lucas, awash in blood and shocked, clung to the board as he paddled to shore. The pain was pulsing through his body. The pain was excruciating. But his wife, Maria, and Sophia, their daughter, gave him the strength to continue. His cries for help broke the silence. 2 people walking on the beach ran to his rescue. As they called an ambulance, Lucas replayed his attack, his fear, and how close he was to dying. The doctors were able to save the leg at the hospital, but the damage had been severe. Lucas was lying in his hospital bed, surrounded by his worried family, when he realized that the physical scars might heal, but the mental ones may never fade. His nights were filled with nightmares about dark waters, and he felt like he was being pulled down. Despite Maria's support, Lucas began to feel a growing distance between himself and the ocean. She sat beside him and held his hand, whispering encouraging words. Lucas started his physical therapy after a few weeks. When he first tried to stand up, lightning-like pain shot through his leg. He was still determined. He thought about his daughter's laugh and the promise that he made to himself to surf again. The psychological scars were deeper. Once a source of solace and happiness, the ocean now appeared as a vast, dangerous entity. Lucas realized he would have to confront his fears to feel whole again. He returned to the sea to not surf, but rather to sit and listen to it. Lucas sat in the sand and watched the waves crash, feeling fear and desire. He remembered his grandfather's words, that the sea teaches us more than we can imagine. Lucas decided to act on that thought. He wouldn't let the shark attack determine his life. He would surf under the moonlight to regain the connection he lost. This decision was the start of a new chapter for his recovery. It would force him to face the deepest fears he harbored. The months rolled by, and Lucas sat at the ocean's edge daily. He felt its pulse and rebuilt the bridge that separated him from the waters that had once cradled his body. The scars on his skin were a reminder of that fateful evening. His physical injuries healed. His emotional recovery took longer, with each step being met by nights of doubt and nightmares of shadowy figures under the moonlit sea. Lucas began to feel a stirring inside as the anniversary of the assault approached, a mixture of fear and defiance. Dr. Helena Sousa encouraged him to set an objective for the day, emphasizing the importance of facing his fears and celebrating his victory over them. Lucas knew exactly what he had to do. He would surf again, not just to prove he could, but to reclaim the joy and freedom of surfing he once experienced. The preparation for the night started weeks in advance. Lucas began by taking small steps and wading in the shallow water, feeling the familiar touch of the ocean against his legs. Maria was there for him, always, and often joined him on the beach, where Sophia splashed around in the water, building sand castles. Her laughter soothed his frayed nerves. Lucas stood on the edge of Praia de Pipa Beach with his surfboard in his arms the night before the anniversary. The moon looked like a crescent of silver, just as it had when he had gone through his ordeal. He felt his heart pound with fear and an increasing sense of victory against the memories that had attempted to chain him. Lucas waded into the water. The familiar chill wrapped around him like a longtime friend. As he paddled, his muscles began remembering their old rhythm, and a calmness washed over him. He was no longer the man who was attacked. He was more robust and more resilient. Lucas paddled with determination and steadied his body as the first wave approached. He stood, balancing his weight with an ease that belied his rapid heartbeat. The wave lifted him like a giant gentleman. The small group of friends and family who supported him cheered as he rode to the shore. Lucas was relieved to return to the beach, feeling like the waves had lifted some of the darkness from him. He hugged Maria, whose presence had been a constant force on his turbulent journey. Sophia ran to him and wrapped her arms around his legs, her excitement evident in her actions. She looked up at him with eyes full of wonder and magic, imagining him surfing the moon. Lucas and his family sat around a small fire that night. The ocean seemed to them less like a monster than a friend who taught him an important lesson. The sea had forever changed him. He knew it would be a long road back to recovery. He also knew that each time he faced waves, he could regain a part of himself he thought he lost. Lucas Mendez's story, in which he faced the jaws and depths of his fears, will be told for many years at Praia da Pipa. His story is not only a story of survival, it's also a testament to how the human spirit can overcome and find renewal at the same place that brought it to its knees. Harry Reynolds sat at the kitchen table, the morning sun filtering through the curtains, casting a warm glow over the room. He stared intently at his laptop screen, heart pounding with anticipation as he clicked on the email notification. His hands trembled slightly as he opened the message from the University of Durban. With bated breath, he read the words that appeared on the screen. "Congratulations, Harry Reynolds. We are pleased to inform you that you have been accepted into the marine engineering program at the University of Durban." Ecstasy surged through Harry like an electric current. A wide grin spread across his face, and he let out a whoop of joy that echoed through the house. He couldn't believe it. His dream of studying maritime engineering and delving into the ocean's mysteries was finally coming true. His mind raced with possibilities. He imagined diving into the crystal-clear waters of the Great Barrier Reef, surrounded by vibrant coral and exotic fish. He pictured himself conducting groundbreaking research, uncovering secrets that could help protect and preserve this natural wonder for future generations. As a boy growing up in the South African city of Pietermaritzburg, about 80 kilometers northwest of Durban, Harry only dreamed of visiting the Great Barrier Reef. But he never imagined that not only would he one day visit the marine masterpiece, but he would also go on to conduct his research on the reef. As he sat there, overwhelmed with emotion, Harry silently vowed to make the most of this incredible opportunity. He knew that studying marine engineering at the University of Durban would be challenging and would push him intellectually and physically to his limits. But he was ready for the challenge. He was ready to dive headfirst into this new chapter of his life, to explore the vast and wondrous world beneath the waves. And he did. After graduating with flying colors from the university, Harry Reynolds embarked on a journey that would take him beyond the shores of South Africa and into the vast expanse of the ocean. His passion for marine life drove him to pursue further studies, and he applied for a scholarship to pursue his master's degree in Australia. To his delight, Harry was selected among a pool of talented applicants, and he eagerly packed his bags for the land he had longed to visit, Australia. Arriving in Australia, Harry was filled with wonder and excitement. The opportunity to study in a country known for its rich marine biodiversity was a dream come true. Eager to immerse himself in his studies, Harry wasted no time connecting with the marine research institutes and universities in the area. Soon, he found himself at a prestigious research institute, where he had the chance to learn from leading experts in the field. In addition to his academic studies, Harry also gained hands-on experience by skippering dive vessels in the region. These experiences allowed him to deepen his understanding of marine ecosystems and develop practical skills to serve him well in future endeavors. As years passed and Harry continued to excel in his studies and research, he caught the attention of key figures in the marine industry. His dedication and passion for marine conservation did not go unnoticed, and he was eventually appointed as one of the executives of the peak industry body for marine tourism. In his new role, Harry was determined to make a difference. He led several research and education projects focused on the Great Barrier Reef, collaborating with organizations like the Great Barrier Reef Foundation to train tourism operators to capture critical data about the reef's health. Through these initiatives, Harry hoped to raise awareness about protecting this natural wonder and inspire others to take action. One of Harry's most intriguing projects involved a study of shark behavior. Unlike traditional experiments conducted in the water, Harry's experiment took place in a controlled environment, a large holding tank. The goal was to understand how sharks respond to barriers and how conditioning can influence their behavior. Harry placed a shark into the tank in the experiment and released several small bait fish. As expected, the shark swam around the tank, attacking and consuming the smaller fish. However, when Harry inserted a vital piece of clear fiberglass into the tank, creating two separate partitions, the shark's behavior changed dramatically. With the shark on one side of the fiberglass and a new set of bait fish on the other, the shark attempted to attack, only to be met with resistance from the barrier. Undeterred, the shark repeated this behavior, attempting to breach the barrier multiple times. Meanwhile, the bait fish remained unharmed in the second partition. Over several weeks, Harry repeated the experiment, each time observing changes in the shark's behavior. As the shark encountered the barrier repeatedly, it gradually became less aggressive, making fewer attempts to attack the baitfish. Eventually, the shark stopped attacking, having learned that a barrier existed between it and its prey. When Harry finally removed the fiberglass divider, the shark remained passive, allowing the baitfish to swim freely without fear of attack. The experiment demonstrated the power of conditioning and how their environment can influence even apex predators like sharks. Harry's groundbreaking research on shark behavior not only illuminated the intricacies of marine life, but also highlighted the importance of conservation efforts in protecting vulnerable species. But that's not the end. He embarks on another expedition. Little does he know that the depths he's about to plunge into will test his understanding of shark behavior and his very will to survive. The research expedition is focused on tagging marine animals to monitor their movements. For Harry, it's a chance to delve deeper into the mysterious world of sharks, shedding light on their migratory patterns and ecological roles within the reef ecosystem. Harry feels a sense of exhilaration with each dive, his passion for marine biology driving him forward. After donning his swimsuit, Harry took a deep breath and descended into the water with a graceful dive, slicing through the surface like a sleek arrow. As he descended deeper, the world above faded away, replaced by the ethereal beauty of the underwater realm. Sunlight filtered down in shimmering shafts, illuminating a kaleidoscope of colors that danced across the coral reefs below. Harry's heart quickened with excitement as he marveled at the vibrant tapestry of marine life that surrounded him. Schools of tropical fish darted to and fro, their iridescent scales catching the light in a dazzling display. But amidst the serene beauty of the coral reefs, Harry spotted a tiger shark, its distinctive stripes marking it as one of the ocean's most fearsome predators. But as Harry carefully approaches a majestic tiger shark, his excitement becomes trepidation when he notices the predatory gleam in the shark's eyes. The tranquil scene erupts into chaos in a split second, as the shark charges towards him with lightning speed. Before he can react, Harry feels the searing pain of sharp teeth sinking into his leg, the force of the shark's bite sending shockwaves of agony through his body. Instinct kicks in as Harry struggles to free himself from the shark's grasp, but the animal refuses to let go, its mighty jaws locked firmly around his limb. Underwater, the struggle between man and beast sends ripples through the water, alerting the crew on the research vessel above. Without hesitation, two fully equipped biologists plunge into the water to rescue their boss, risking their own lives to save him from the jaws of the tiger shark. Combined, they pry Harry free from the shark's grip, hauling him onto the boat's safety. As the adrenaline fades, Harry's pain intensifies, and the magnitude of what just occurred sinks in. But amidst the chaos and fear, there is a glimmer of hope. Harry is alive thanks to his colleagues' quick thinking and bravery. From the research vessel, Harry is airlifted to a nearby hospital, where he undergoes emergency treatment by specialist doctors. The physical wounds may heal in time, but the emotional scars run deep, a constant reminder of the dangers that lurk beneath the ocean's surface. Despite the harrowing ordeal, Harry never regrets pursuing his passion for marine biology. If anything, the experience only strengthens his resolve to continue his research and conservation efforts, fueled by a newfound appreciation for the fragility of life and the importance of protecting our oceans. As Harry recuperates in the hospital, surrounded by his colleagues and loved ones, he reflects on the journey that brought him to this point. The Great Barrier Reef has become like a second home to him, a place of wonder and discovery, but also of danger and unpredictability. The icy waters of Dyer Island's shoreline were a stark contrast to the blazing African sun overhead, as Mike Rutledge and his friend Anthony Dawson slipped into their dry suits and secured their masks. Behind them, the rugged cliffs rose sharply before flattening out into the rolling hills and scrublands, so iconic to this remote stretch of South Africa's Western Cape. Mike and Anthony took a few moments to run through their mental checklists, ensuring their camera rigs were functioning properly. As experienced marine wildlife photographers, they knew better than to cut corners, especially given the sensitivity of their photo expedition plans for the day. The island's isolated, windswept shores were legendary for the dense population of marine life that called the frigid waters home. Cape fur seals, by the thousands, dominated the beaches in a constant cacophony of barks and squalls. And beneath the waves, one of the world's most concentrated territories for great white sharks, prowled the seals' raucous buffet. But the seal colonies weren't their sole focus for this trip. Their real obsession was capturing elusive footage of the great white shark's legendary breeding grounds. This rarely seen phenomenon could unlock many of the mysterious species' mating habits and reproductive cycles. After a short boat ride, Mike and Anthony, together with their crew, anchored a few hundred yards offshore from Shark Alley, one of Dyer Island's more remote and inaccessible inlets. Undeterred by the crashing waves and deep-water chop, Mike and Anthony pulled on their fins and rolled backward off the boat, temporarily disappearing beneath the steel-gray surface before kicking up towards daylight. A slight current immediately began pulling the duo toward Shark Alley, eerily quiet below the din of the surface world. Checking their camera housings for security one last time, they sank downwards until the ocean floor's muddled shapes finally took form around 50 feet below. It didn't take long for their hunt to bear fruit as they spotted several great whites casually circling the area. Their telltale beady eyes scanned the surroundings as they gracefully weaved through the water. Any initial nerves on Mike's part quickly dissolved as he settled into his element as a stealthy observer. After shadowing the first few sharks for some time, the duo's attention was pulled southward by an unusual cluster of movement and activity near a rocky outcropping along the seafloor. As they drew cautiously nearer, they recognized the immediate cause for the commotion: a pregnant female great white surrounded by nearly a dozen suitors in an epic mating frenzy. As Mike advanced to take snapshots of the incredible scene, Anthony hung back at a safer distance, instinctively uneasy about breaching the perimeter too closely. Mike began snapping furiously as the 15-foot queen shark alternated between aggressively bucking her robust body to keep the smaller males away before going limp enough to permit their clumsy advances. The roiled chaos stirred up a nebulous silt as mating tails thrashed violently, giving Mike's shots an exquisitely gritty and chilling quality. Minutes turned to hours as the opportunity of a lifetime played out before Mike's lens, but the constant action of the still-pitch battle barely registered with his zoned-in psyche. Anthony's unease grew as he noticed Mike's obsession, causing him to drift dangerously close to the swirling vortex of sharks. Unfortunately, his single-minded obsession caused Mike to inadvertently penetrate the perimeter a bit too closely to the swirling vortex of sharks. Despite the rolling melee, one of the largest suitors picked up on the foreign presence creeping within their inner sanctum and broke off in an automatic hardwired response to eliminate the perceived threat to the female. Mike was so hyper-focused on framing his upcoming shot that he missed the flash of the male great white speeding towards him. In the literal blink of an eye, the full linebacker mass of the shark had cannoned squarely into Mike's torso, snapping bone and suit like a twig as the force drove the wind from his lungs in a silent scream. Unable to draw a new breath, Mike reflexively gulped a lungful of seawater as he tumbled end over end, dazed by the blinding white jolt of agony piercing his body. The shark didn't hesitate, spinning and snapping back with blinding quickness as its jaws clamped down on Mike's oxygen tank, shearing the metal and rubber pieces cleanly off. Now weightless from his severed lifeline, Mike desperately attempted swimming towards the distant surface but was rapidly losing strength and awareness as blood and bubbles inked upward in a plume. Just as the glimmer of daylight grew larger above him, the massive predator pounded down again for a final catastrophic hit. The shark's charging skull hammered Mike's face mask, fracturing it and sending a spider web of cracks materializing across the plastic lens. The next unavoidable impact crushed the entire unit again into Mike's face in a burst of crunching bone and gristle, as the lower rows of razor-sharp teeth continued to delve deeper into his mangled flesh. Unable to intervene against such horrific violence, Anthony felt his heart splinter as he watched his friend's lifeless body go limp, dragged away by the shark towards the endless blue depths below. Capturing the image on his own camera, Anthony was not able to move for a few seconds due to shock. But as soon as his senses snapped back, he started swimming to the surface. It was the longest descent of his life. He was afraid to take a look back, knowing that the shark might come after him. But he was able to reach the surface. The shark retreated into the depths, and Anthony made it out alive, unlike his friend Mike, who was not as lucky. The following morning's news broadcasts led with a somber account of Mike Rutledge's demise. The young photographer's risk of breaching the Great White Mating Ground's safety perimeter yielded haunting footage of an unbridled struggle for life itself, amid nature's rawest specimens. Mike's family and fellow conservationists were naturally devastated by the heartbreaking loss. Still, they shouldered the tragedy with the understanding that immense dangers always exist for those willing to encroach upon any species' inviolable breeding spaces. As emotionally wrenching as the events around Dyer Island were, many praised Mike's dedication while also hoping his ultimate sacrifice would vindicate the importance of diligently observing and respecting wildlife from a secure distance. The early morning air along the Cape Agulhas coastline in 2003 held a deceptive stillness. Leora Jansen breathed in the salty tang, a familiar scent that soothed and invigorated her. On May 26th, the sun was just a soft glow on the horizon, casting streaks of gold across the calm surface of the Indian Ocean. But Leora knew from experience that the water hid its secrets beneath the tranquil facade. This was prime territory for sharks, especially the great whites that patrolled the South African coast. This made her job both nerve-wracking and exhilarating. Leora had joined the Marine Patrol with a heart full of youthful idealism. She grew up in a coastal village. The ocean was her playground and teacher. Her fisherman father had instilled in her a deep respect for the sea and its creatures. But she'd also witnessed the carelessness, the pollution, the danger that often came from human hands. The Marine Patrol was her way of making a difference, ensuring there was something left to protect for her future children. She steered the boat expertly, her eyes scanning the horizon with the trained focus of a hunter. This morning's mission was routine, checking on a tangled mass spotted by a local charter. It could be debris or a net, often a death trap for seals, dolphins, and sharks. Leora's stomach clenched when she thought of the photos she'd seen. Animals drowned or mutilated by those abandoned nets. Anger mixed with determination fueled her. Leora reached the area and cut the engine. Her partner, Xander, helped her don the dive gear, his smile a familiar reassurance. Xander was a veteran nearing retirement and had taken her under his wing. She was young and reckless, he with his stoic dependability. Still, they shared a fierce love for the ocean and an unwavering commitment to its guardianship. She slipped into the water with a practiced splash. Visibility was decent, and she spotted the tangled mass, an abandoned fishing net, as suspected. Xander would remain on the boat, radio in hand. The procedure dictated she investigate the situation before taking action. Leora circled the net, noting how it was snagged on the reef. A flicker of shadow passed below her, just a flicker. But her instincts, honed in these waters, went on high alert. She kicked towards the reef, peering into the gloom. Suddenly, a monstrous shape materialized from the murky depths, the chilling silhouette unmistakable. It was massive, a true titan of the deep, a great white, and it was on an intercept course. Leora froze. Time seemed to stretch, everything going into slow motion. The shark lunged, its gaping maw a black abyss lined with serrated teeth. Instinct took over. She twisted, but not fast enough. The shark's jaws clamped onto her arm and shoulder in a crushing vice. The force spun her around, seawater burning her eyes as she felt teeth rip into flesh and muscle. Agony exploded through her, a blinding white flash of pain while her ears filled with the muffled crunch of bone. Survival kicked in. She kicked and clawed at the shark's rough hide, trying to gouge its eyes. It seemed futile, a gnat against a giant. Yet something compelled her to fight, something fierce and primal. Above, Xander was screaming into the radio for backup, his voice cracking with a panic he'd never shown in the years they'd worked together. He saw Leora thrashing around like a rag doll, the water turning crimson around her. He grabbed his rifle, heart pounding in his throat. He had a single, terrifying shot if he had to take it. Miraculously, the shark released her. Disoriented and in unimaginable pain, Leora thrashed towards the surface. She broke through the waterline with what felt like her last ounce of strength, gasping in a lungful of air. Then the boat was there, Xander hauling her on board, applying frantic pressure to the wounds. The ride to shore was a blur of pain and nausea. She drifted in and out of consciousness, aware of Xander's panicked voice shouting for the medics, the rocking of the boat, and the smell of her blood. She didn't even know when she passed out entirely. When Leora awoke, it was in the clinical whiteness of a hospital room. Her entire left side was a mass of bandaged agony. Her arm was mangled beyond recognition. A nurse bustled in, her voice a mix of sympathy and professional detachment. She explained that Leora was lucky to be alive, but the damage was extensive. An amputation was inevitable. The full impact of it hit Leora like a second wave. She stared at the space at the end of her bed. The life she knew washed away. No more swimming in the ocean and patrolling the waters she loved. The career she'd poured her heart and soul into was simply gone. Waves of grief rolled over her in the following weeks. The phantom limb ached mercilessly, a cruel reminder of what she'd lost. Worst of all, the guilt, the if only, haunted her sleep. Then anger would flare, at the carelessness that put nets in the water and the protocols that didn't fully protect those who risked their lives for marine safety. But Xander stayed by her side, his presence a rough comfort. He was a man who usually kept his own counsel, but now he opened up about losing comrades in the line of duty. The ocean, he reminded her, had always been a place of beauty and danger. Tragedy didn't diminish their duty, it only underscored its importance. A news crew drawn to the dramatic shark attack story wanted an interview with Leora. Leora initially refused, but then an idea started to form. She could use this platform not as a victim, but as a force for change. She spoke to the camera, the bandages, and the pain proof of her ordeal. She didn't just tell her story. She demanded better safeguards for those patrolling the coasts and pleaded for sustainable fishing practices that protected all sea life, humans and alike. Her story went viral. It ignited a conversation, spotlighting the often overlooked dangers marine conservationists faced. Reliving the trauma wasn't easy, but with every interview and outreach effort, Leora felt her strength returning. It wasn't how she'd imagined, but this was her fight. She was a guardian of the ocean, and that wouldn't change, not even with one less arm. In the cloak of night, Officer Markson stood at the helm of the Coast Guard cutter, his steady gaze fixed upon the roiling expanse of the ocean. Beside him, his crew moved with practiced precision, their faces etched with determination as they braved the elements in pursuit of their mission, a desperate plea for help echoing through the crackling radio waves. Meanwhile, aboard another ill-fated vessel, the Anderson family clung to each other amidst the chaos. Their once idyllic cruise transformed into a harrowing struggle for survival. The family and their adventurous son Tim embarked on a thrilling boat cruise and were excited as they set sail into the vast expanse of the ocean, ready for a week of relaxation and fun. However, their joyous journey took a sudden turn when they encountered turbulent waves during a storm. The once calm seas turned into a raging storm, and their sturdy ship was no match for the ferocity. The boat was tossed and turned until it succumbed, breaking apart under the immense pressure. As the Andersons were adrift during the chaos, they scrambled to devise a survival plan. John attempted to steer the wreckage towards calmer waters, but the waves seemed determined to thwart their every effort. With her unwavering resolve, Sarah scoured the ship for any supplies they could salvage, while Tim, despite his fear, remained brave, encouraging his parents. Their attempts at navigation proved futile as the storm raged on, leaving them helpless and stranded in the vast ocean. With their provisions dwindling and hope fading, they turned to their only lifeline, the radio. With each transmission, they sent distress calls to the lifeguards, praying for a response amid the roaring winds and crashing waves. Despite the odds stacked against them, the Andersons refused to surrender to despair, drawing strength from their unwavering bond as a family. And then, just when it seemed all was lost, a crackle of static broke through the silence, followed by the reassuring voice of Officer Markson on the other end of the line. Help was on the way. As they neared the coordinates, the darkness seemed to thicken, suffocating the feeble beams of their searchlights. A sense of foreboding crept over Officer Markson, his grip tightening on the helm as the unsettling stillness wrapped around them like a shroud. The ocean churned ominously, its depths concealing untold mysteries and perils. Then a flicker of light pierced the gloom, revealing the distress beacon of the stranded vessel. With practiced precision, the Coast Guard crew sprang into action, deploying 2 lifeboats and donning their gear with silent determination. As they approached the stricken vessel, Markson's trained eyes scanned the murky expanse, his senses attuned to the slightest anomaly that might spell danger for his crew and the stranded family they were about to rescue. With careful coordination, they helped the Andersons into one of the lifeboats, ensuring their safety before preparing to tow the vessel back to the safety of the Coast Guard cutter. The Andersons' faces were etched with relief and gratitude as they clambered aboard, their faith in their rescuers unwavering despite the treacherous circumstances. As Markson and his team prepared to set sail back to the safety of their vessel, a sudden commotion erupted from the darkness. A low, guttural growl reverberated through the water, sending shivers down their spines. Before they could react, a massive shadow surged from the depths, its sleek form illuminated by the pale moonlight. With a thunderous splash, the monstrous silhouette sliced through the murky depths, materializing into the formidable form of a massive shark. The crew of the Coast Guard cutter recoiled in horror as the creature circled, its malevolent gaze fixated on its unsuspecting prey. Officer Markson's heart thundered in his chest as he grappled with the surreal terror of the moment, his mind racing to devise a plan of action. Summoning every ounce of courage, Markson lunged, harpoon in hand, poised to strike at the looming threat. But his aim faltered, the harpoon missing its mark by a hair's breadth. Before he could react, the creature surged forward with ferocious speed, jaws agape, ready to claim its prize. In a blur of motion, Markson felt the searing pain as the beast's razor-sharp teeth sank into his flesh, a symphony of agony engulfing his senses. With a primal roar of defiance, he grappled with the behemoth, his comrades unleashing a barrage of desperate salvos in a frantic bid to save their fallen comrade. After a while, Markson was wrenched free from the beast's grasp, blood mingling with the brine as he staggered toward safety. As the creature vanished into the abyss, its predatory gaze lingering like a phantom, Markson's ordeal had only begun. Bloodied, Markson was hoisted aboard the cutter, his comrades rallying around him with grim determination. But amidst the chaos, a chilling realization dawned. The creature's attack was not an isolated incident, but a harbinger of a greater menace lurking in the depths. As Markson fought for his life in the sterile confines of the infirmary, whispers of dread swept through the Coast Guard ranks. Nightmares of shadowy predators haunted their thoughts, casting a pall over their once unshakable resolve. Amidst the clamor of debate and dissent, a consensus emerged. A new era of innovation and vigilance, where cutting-edge technologies and rigorous protocols stood as bulwarks against the encroaching darkness. From sonar arrays to thermal imaging, the arsenal of the Coast Guard was bolstered with tools designed to pierce the veil of night and expose the lurking threats that prowled beneath. With each passing day, Markson and his fellow guardians of the sea stood ready to confront the dangers lurking in the watery depths, their resolve unshaken by fear. The Australian sunshine danced on the waves rolling into Shelley Point, a postcard-perfect image of coastal paradise. This was precisely the place Sarah Walker dreamed of when she and her husband Tom planned their big family trip. It was a long way from their suburban life in Melbourne, but as she watched her children Maya and Ben giddy with excitement at the edge of the water, Sarah knew it was worth every mile traveled. Sarah reveled in these carefree moments. Life had become an endless juggling act. Tom's job, the kids' school, and sports schedules. She barely came up for air. Now, on June 23, 2006, time seemed to soften. She wasn't just mom right now, but an explorer alongside her children, sharing their first glimpse of the ocean's vastness. This afternoon was all about surfing lessons. Ben, always the cautious one, hung back a little nervously. Maya, however, dove right in, a natural on the board. With a few beginner lessons years ago as her primary qualification, Sarah volunteered to help. The water was refreshing. The instructor was patient and reassuring. Laughter filled the air as they caught small waves, sharing triumphant tumbles into the water. Maya first spotted the dark shape beneath the wave, a flash of gray under the surface. Before Sarah could process what it was, the water exploded beneath her feet with terrifying force. Pain ripped through her leg as the massive body of the shark slammed into her. Panicked, she saw its substantial open mouth, the rows of razor teeth. She thrashed unthinkingly, fueled by a mother's desperate protectiveness. Her hand made contact with the rough, sandpaper-like skin, and somehow she pushed off the creature. It seemed to circle, disoriented by the sudden movement. The instructor was shouting, dragging Maya towards the shore. Tom materialized, wading in with a panicked expression, reaching for Sarah, for Ben. Then as swiftly as it appeared, the shark vanished into the deeper water. Her leg was a burning mess. She felt dizzy and nauseous. The beach, moments ago filled with laughter, was now a scene of chaos. Someone was yelling for a tourniquet, and another person was on the phone with emergency services. Sarah focused on Maya and Ben, crying hysterically on the sand, their initial joy shattered by this unimaginable horror. Tom reached her, his usually calm face ashen, his hands shaking as he tried to help. The pain was excruciating, a wave washing over her as the shock started to fade. Then she saw the extent of the damage. Her leg below the knee was simply gone, leaving a mangled stump. Terror mixed with sickness churned in her stomach. How would she ever explain this to her children? How would she ever live an everyday life again? The paramedics rushed her to the hospital, a whirlwind of activity around her, none of it registering fully. Tom went with her, shell-shocked but trying to stay composed. A kind social worker distracted Maya and Ben, but their terrified eyes haunted her. It should have been her protecting them, not the other way around. The surgery was a blur with hazy voices and more searing pain. When she woke adequately, it was to the side of her empty pant leg pinned up, the new reality sinking in with a coldness far worse than any physical discomfort. Tom held her hand, his eyes red-rimmed. She saw the strain, the way he bravely tried to smile. She'd barely come out of the woods, and now he had to deal with a broken wife as well as traumatized children. The news traveled fast. The family vacation turned tragic. It was the stuff of sensational headlines. At first, Sarah recoiled from the publicity, wanting to hide. Then a new feeling emerged, a flicker of anger. They weren't just victims. They wouldn't let this incident define them. While she was still hospitalized, she spoke to a reporter. No tears, no self-pity. Instead, she talked about Maya and Ben's bravery in facing the shark. She spoke about her children and why she fought so hard to survive. And she stressed the need for better education and more awareness for those enjoying the ocean. She insisted it wasn't about scaring people, but about respect and understanding. The interview struck a chord. Donations poured into a fund they set up under Sarah's name, not just for her recovery, but for ocean safety programs. She started receiving letters, some from fellow shark attack survivors and others from beachgoers touched by her story. Her words, born out of pain, had somehow sparked something. Her recovery was brutal. Phantom pains haunted her, and learning to walk with a prosthetic was a frustrating, humiliating process. She had moments of despair, questioning whether she'd ever be the mother her children deserved. But Maya and Ben rallied around her, fierce in their protectiveness. They drew pictures of her with her new leg, adding silly touches and encouraging notes. Tom, her rock, never faltered in his support. Sarah returned to the ocean. It was terrifying but crucial. She wasn't going to be ruled by fear. The first swim was shaky, Tom hovering nearby. But with each venture back into those depths, a little more of her confidence returned. The foundation they started thrived. She gave talks at schools, warning kids not just about sharks, but the inherent dangers of the ocean. They lobbied for better response systems and quicker medical attention at famous beaches. She became a familiar figure at marine conferences, not as the woman who lost her leg, but as the mother who channeled her pain into positive change. The memory of the attack would never indeed fade. There were still days when the nightmares came, leaving her shaking and disoriented. The ocean would always hold a tinge of danger now. But alongside the trauma, she also carried something else. The knowledge that she didn't just survive, she fought back. She and her family found their voices, turning their ordeal into a force for good. And that strength, forged in the most unexpected and terrifying ways, was its kind of victory. As the Hawaiian sun began its ascent over the tranquil waters, Emily stood on the balcony of their beachfront hotel, feeling the gentle caress of the island breeze against her skin. She glanced over at James, still fast asleep, his face peaceful in the early morning light. Today was the day they had eagerly anticipated for months, the culmination of their love story unfolding amid paradise. Reflecting on their journey together, Emily couldn't help but smile at the memory of their serendipitous meeting at their college prom in Washington. From the moment they locked eyes across the dance floor, she knew there was something special about James. Their connection deepened as they navigated the challenges of college life together, supporting each other through late-night study sessions and young adulthood's inevitable ups and downs. After graduation, they both embarked on promising careers, but their shared dream of a fairy tale wedding never wavered. With diligent saving and careful planning, they finally decided on Hawaii as the perfect destination to exchange their vows, drawn to its romantic atmosphere and breathtaking scenery. As the morning sun bathed the island in a golden glow, Emily felt a surge of excitement building within her. Today was meant to celebrate their love, a testament to the bond they had forged over the years. But as she gazed at the azure waters stretching before her, an unexpected idea began to take shape in her mind. Days before the wedding, Emily was so busy preparing that she didn't have time to enjoy the luxury services provided by the hotel they booked. One of them was paddleboarding on the North Pacific Ocean. By the time she'd finished setting up the necessary things, it was the D-Day of the wedding. And after the wedding, the couple traveled to Dubai for their honeymoon. So Emily decided to paddleboard that morning before she went back to get ready for the ceremony. Emily declared her intention with a sparkle in her eyes as she gathered her bridesmaids around her. Despite their initial hesitations, the bridesmaids couldn't resist Emily's infectious enthusiasm. With laughter and chatter, they set out onto the calm waters, the promise of adventure beckoning them forward. As they paddled further from shore, they chatted loudly while they took pictures and videos of their escapade. They didn't even notice that a shadowy figure had emerged from the depths, its sleek form slicing through the water with deadly precision. Before anyone could react, a sharp pain lanced through Emily's leg, and she cried out in agony as she tumbled into the water. Shock and panic gripped the group as they watched in horror as a shark circled, drawn by the scent of blood and trying to attack again. Fortunately, they hadn't gone far in the water, so with adrenaline-fueled urgency, some of the bridesmaids pulled her up from underneath the water. In contrast, the others rallied around Emily, forming a protective barrier to prevent the shark as they fought to get her back to shore. Emily's heart pounded in her chest as she struggled to stay afloat, the pain in her leg throbbing with each movement. With the help of her quick-thinking bridesmaids, they hoisted her onto one of the paddleboards, their frantic paddling propelling them back towards the safety of the shore. Adrenaline coursed through Emily's veins as she clung to consciousness, her mind reeling from the shock of the attack. The once serene ocean now seemed like a treacherous battleground, its depths concealing unseen dangers lurking beneath the surface. As they reached the shallows, Emily's bridesmaids rushed to her side, worried expressions mirroring her fear and pain. With trembling hands, they applied makeshift first aid to her leg, doing their best to stem the bleeding until help could arrive. Meanwhile, word of the shark attack had spread quickly throughout the hotel, sending shockwaves through the wedding party and guests alike. Amidst the chaos, James raced to Emily's side, his heart heavy with concern for his beloved bride. With the help of the hotel staff, they managed to stabilize Emily and transport her to the nearest medical facility, where she underwent emergency surgery to repair the damage to her leg. It was a long and agonizing ordeal, but through it all, James never left her side, his unwavering love and support serving as a beacon of hope in their darkest hour. As the sun began to set on what was supposed to be the happiest day of their lives, Emily and James faced an uncertain future. The dream of their fairy tale wedding was so close to being shattered by the harsh reality of nature's cruelty that they grappled with a profound sense of loss and disbelief. However, after 2 days, Emily was deemed fit enough to leave the hospital. They returned to the hotel where their wedding was supposed to occur. Despite her limp, Emily was determined to marry the love of her life, surrounded by their closest friends and family. With tears and hearts full of love, Emily and James exchanged vows on the same beach where tragedy forever changed their lives. It was a bittersweet moment, a testament to their resilience and the power of love to overcome even the darkest days. After the ceremony, they returned to the hospital to continue Emily's recovery, and their honeymoon was put on hold indefinitely. But even amid uncertainty, they found joy and laughter, cherishing each precious moment together as they looked toward the future with hope and optimism. Years passed, and Emily's leg healed, leaving behind only a faint scar as a reminder of the ordeal they had overcome. But the memory of that fateful day remained etched in their minds, a testament to the strength of their love and the unbreakable bond that had carried them through the storm. A thick, soupy fog clung to the flat gray waters of Falmouth Beach as the first hints of dawn crept over the horizon. The quiet summer morning was disrupted only by the occasional cries of gulls searching for an easy meal among the tidal racklines. Despite the blanketing mist drastically reducing visibility, 24-year-old Megan and her friend Anna Cassidy slipped off their flip-flops and left them in sloppy piles atop the coarse sand. With quick tugs, they wriggled free of their tank tops and shorts before bracing themselves against the chilly surf with sharp inhales. Early morning swims were a ritual the two friends shared throughout the summer months. They adored the muted silence and dewy smells of humid salt air mingling with the heavier petrichor wafting up from the tide pools. Today, though, the velvety mists shrouded everything more than a few yards away into an impenetrable void. Still, Megan and Anna paid it no mind as they ventured out into the soupy shallows until the chalky water level reached their upper thighs. Their breaths turned to vapor with each exhale as they began swimming parallel to the shore with a practiced breaststroke. The lapping rhythm of the ebbing waves and occasional screech of hunting gulls quickly faded from their senses as Megan and Anna settled into a tranquil routine of surfacing for air before plunging back into the eerie isolation of the fog bank. A few hundred yards down the shoreline, the metallic aroma of fresh chum wafted through the air in a pungent cloud. Every summer, the local sport fishing crowd gathered at first light to cast baited lines for the seasonal striped bass that passed through the area. Their indiscriminate chumming masked any warnings that might have alerted Megan to the heightened predatory danger. About a half-mile offshore and completely obscured by the dense fog, a large bull shark had taken notice of the chumming parties as amino-rich particles began wafting through the currents. The feeding frenzy quickly became a siren's call, drawing it closer to the scent trail's source. Megan took a deep breath and allowed her body to sink below the surface once more, luxuriating in the near-sensory deprivation of swimming blindly through the muffled silence. She strained her ears, attempting to triangulate her location based on any discernible sounds. That's when a thunderous crash of weightless porcelain erupted just yards away, shattering the stillness and causing Megan to flinch in alarm. Before she could process what was happening, the mammoth bull shark had her directly in its broad-nosed sights and quickly closed the distance with a dozen powerful tail swipes. Its sandy brown body remained practically invisible until the wide, serrated jaws unhinged mere inches from Megan's splashing form. Anna managed to suck in a shriek of terror as the jagged night teeth emerged from the ghostly mists, piercing Megan's torso. Anna watched in horror as the unyielding jaws clamped down, obliterating bone and cartilage as bloody froth bubbled from the ragged holes in Megan's punctured organs. The shark whipped its thrashing head, violently dismembering Megan's body as she slipped into shock. Instinctively, Megan's body went rigid as a result of the shock and trauma caused by the excruciating pain of the shark tearing through her flesh. With her eyes bulging in horror and her body frozen in fear, all Anna could do was witness her friend being butchered until Megan's sight faded and her mutilated remains disappeared into the black depths with the shark. Fragmented glimpses of Megan's body being violently dismembered can be seen under the blood-soaked waters. Anna let out a piercing shriek. She wanted to move away from the scene, but her body betrayed her. She could still smell the pungent scent of her friend's blood as it stuck with her body, making her want to vomit out of fear and disgust. The next notice of activity came from the beach itself as the early morning chumming rituals were interrupted by Anna's ghastly screaming piercing through the fog cover. A handful of anglers rushed towards the sound, while desperately shouting for the source of anguish among the crashing waves. Within minutes, the waters erupted in a turbid mist of pink as Megan's body resurfaced, helplessly ragdolled by the relentless thrashing. Her butchered appendages and mutilated remains materialized across the beachscape with each fresh wave of grisly crimson flooding towards the shoreline where Anna had crawled, shell-shocked. By the time emergency responders arrived, the attack had concluded in the distance, leaving only Anna as the sole witness alongside the blood-stained evidence of carnage along the sand and sea foam. The dense fog refused to shed any insight into what exactly happened until the following morning, once the sea became clear. Upon further investigation, the distinctive bite radius and unique tearing patterns of the mutilated remains revealed the unmistakable calling cards of a bull shark, an aggressive species rarely encountered in the calm New England waters around Falmouth Beach. However, it appeared the culprit's proximity was likely temporary and situational. Forensic analysis of the chum buckets used by the local chumming groups that morning showed they contained a mixture of expired meats, fish guts, and carcasses, the kind of indiscriminate proteins that could easily lure opportunistic sharks from miles away with the right current patterns. While shocking, the incident prompted an immediate review of safety protocols around the community's beaches and fishing habits. Most notably, restrictions were placed on swimming during dense fog or inclement weather conditions that impede visual sightlines. Furthermore, a comprehensive waste management policy was enacted to ensure local fishing outfitters dispose of expired bait and chum materials in a responsible way that doesn't attract the wrong kind of hungry scavengers. Though the scars from that morning's savage attack would never fully heal, Anna was determined to ensure Megan's death was not in vain. She advocated tirelessly for renewed safety guidelines around the community's beaches and fishing habits to help prevent any more such unthinkable tragedies from taking others by surprise in the future. The Gulf of Mexico shimmered on August 2, 2005, a vast stretch of blue under a blazing sun, a deceptive beauty that had captivated Dr. Eli Brody from boyhood. Yet beneath that familiar surface, a hidden struggle was happening. This was his battleground. Not just the natural threats inherent in the sea, but also the ones humans brought. Chemicals, pollution, the invisible tide of human impact. It was why he dedicated his career to marine biology, not just studying the ocean, but finding ways to help it fight back. Eli checked his equipment meticulously. Every dive was a precious chance to collect more data. Years ago, he'd established a research station at Crystal Creek, a remote offshoot of the Central Gulf. Back then, it was a thriving ecosystem. The water quality was failing, coral reefs were dying, and fish populations were dwindling. He was tracking the decline with a sense of urgency, desperately seeking a solution. His wife, Anya, shared his passion rather than his need for fieldwork. Whenever he headed out on a research trip, he could feel her unspoken worries, which had only grown after their young son, Benji, was born. Eli loved his lab and university post, but with its messy, unpredictable truth, the ocean called him more strongly. Today was a simple dive collecting samples for a new study on chemical runoff from nearby industries. His small team loaded the boat, banter masking the undercurrent of vigilance they all felt. Sharks weren't uncommon here, but they usually kept their distance. Still, the ocean was the domain, and sharks were merely guests. Eli slipped over the side of the boat, the familiar scent of salt and the slight chill of the water reawakening his senses. Thanks to the swirling particulate matter, visibility was poor. He descended slowly, carefully placing the sample containers within the marked zones. The seafloor was littered with unnatural textures, bits of plastics, and discarded machinery. This is depressing but crucial documentation in tracking the ecosystem's decline. A movement, a flicker on the edge of his vision set off alarm bells. It came from below, a large shape rising through the haze. His hand instinctively reached towards his dive knife, even though he knew how ineffective a weapon it was against something this size. It was a bull shark, known for their aggressive preference for murky, near-shore waters like this. He fought back a surge of panic. Steady, procedure, slow back towards the boat. Eli couldn't outswim it. The bull shark closed in, a relentless torpedo of muscle and teeth. Its first pass was almost exploratory, a hard bump that sent him spinning, pain flaring in his leg. Then it came again, sinking its teeth into his calf. Eli felt a searing burn as the shark tore at his flesh, the force of it dragging him further down. Panic threatened to overwhelm him, but his training cut through the terror. He lashed out, his knife finding purchase in the shark's flank. It released him, leaving him in a cloud of his blood. Unthinkingly, he kicked towards the surface. His team was shouting. He could hear the chaos from above. Rough hands hauled him out of the water and onto the deck. Someone slapped on a tourniquet. The world dimmed around the edges, pain washing over him in agonizing waves. At the hospital, they stitched his wounds, a brutal patchwork of torn muscle and jagged gashes. The doctor warned him that the risk of infection was high given the source of the injuries. He was given a standard course of antibiotics, a precaution that usually did the trick. But this time, it wasn't enough. A low-grade fever started a few days later. They assumed it was a residual issue from the initial trauma, but then the fever spiked. Weakness set in, his whole body racked with chills and relentless nausea. The team in the small coastal hospital was perplexed. Anya flew down, taking over logistics while also masking her growing fear. They were used to Eli bouncing back. This wasn't him at all. Tests were run and cultures were sent off to a specialized lab. When the results finally came back, they were baffling. Eli was infected with a rare marine bacteria, previously known but highly uncommon in human patients. Worse, it stubbornly resisted the array of antibiotics thrown at it. He was transferred to a larger facility, now not just a recovering shark attack victim but a medical anomaly. The infectious disease specialist was intrigued and alarmed. This antibiotic resistance wasn't usually seen outside intensive care units. They theorized the shark's mouth, home to countless microbes, had acted as a terrifying inoculation, exposing Eli to something his immune system couldn't fight. Now Eli lay in the sterile hospital room, ironically battling the ripple effects of his greatest passion. Anya held his hand, worry etched in her face. His son called via video and he couldn't summon the energy to fake a smile. What kind of legacy was this? The infectious disease team proposed an experimental treatment with his condition worsening, still in trials. He was fading fast. It was a long shot, but better than nothing. Miraculously, it worked. The stubborn, resistant bacteria finally yielded, the fever broke, and strength slowly returned. The team was triumphant, but Eli had a more profound change. His brush with death had revealed a terrifying truth. The pollution, the human impact he'd been fighting, had evolved into a far more insidious threat. The ocean became a harbor for antibiotic-resistant bacteria, making a superficial wound potentially lethal. He was discharged, still weak, but with a renewed fire. His research took a drastic turn. This was the new frontier, the actual danger. He worked tirelessly, partnering with the infectious disease team and collecting samples from marine environments near and far. The data was alarming. The resistant bacteria wasn't contained in his case. It was spreading, fueled by pollution and poor antibiotic disposal practices. The ocean they loved had become a silent battleground, and Eli was determined to expose the threat and find solutions to combat it. The inky blackness of the Indian Ocean stretched out infinitely from the dive team's boat as it gently rocked atop the calm surface waters near Ningaloo Reef. A sliver of waxing moon provided the scant illumination that allowed them to begin suiting up and checking their dive gear one final time. For Eliza and her experienced crew of night diving fanatics, there were few things more exhilarating than descending beneath the velvety obsidian waves to witness the underwater universe truly come alive after dark. The reef systems transform into a bustling metropolis after sundown, with exotic and elusive creatures emerging from their diurnal shelters to hunt, mate, and roam the coastline. As the team lead, Eliza ensured each diver's equipment was functioning flawlessly. Underwater camera rigs with bright LED lamps, location signaling devices, cutting tools, and most crucially, a plentiful supply of enriched air tanks for extended bottom time. One by one, the 5 divers back-rolled into the shadowy waters, fastidious about following protocols to the letter on these inherently higher-risk outings. The initial descent shafts filtered the last glimpses of moonlight until the group was surrounded by a starry void of open sea, with powerful lamps cutting through the mirage. Eliza allowed herself a brief moment of childlike wonder, watching the ethereal bioluminescent plankton spark and glimmer as it scattered around her dive buddies. Upon reaching the outer reef wall at 60 feet, The group oriented themselves with the shimmering faux daylight of the lamp rays reflecting off myriad kaleidoscopic surfaces. The vibrant colors and activity were dazzling compared to daytime dives as schools of trevally, pick-handle barracuda, and fusiliers paraded past. For nearly an hour, the group remained mesmerized by snapshot glimpses into the secret lives of this hidden realm, before striking out towards a deeper channel lined with wild sea whips. Their paths converged there, with Eliza motioning to the others about a particularly robust Philamid night shrimp colony carpeting the seabed ahead. In her near decade of leading these nightly expeditions, she'd learned that the Philamids served as an ideal attractant for all types of aquatic activity, filtering through the channel to feed on their numbers. To the other divers, it appeared as if Eliza was attempting to bait the waters with her illuminated presence, lingering amid the shrimp colony. And indeed, her intuitions were sound, as a sudden burst of activity in her peripheral vision signaled something massive darting across her lamp's beam. Eliza hastily spun her head and camera rig towards the subject, greeted by a primordial visage of teeth unlike any she'd borne witness to in the wild before. A massive tiger shark, nearly 15 feet in length, glided directly towards the dive team. The creature's distinctive blunt snout and banded camouflage pattern immediately triggered a visceral knot of terror in Eliza's core. As one of the ocean's most formidable apex predators, the tiger's aggressive reputation preceded it. As calm as Eliza tried to remain, the sight of witnessing such a ghostly apparition cruising with unmistakable predatory intent sent a visceral chill of fright lancing down her spine. Rather than retreat safely away from the group, she found herself fixated in place by eerie curiosity, fighting to steady her breathing as the shark closed to mere body lengths away. In that instant, Eliza raised her camera again, determined to capture a coveted glimpse into one of nature's most fearsome apex predators. The glinting electric blue illuminators reflected with menacing brilliance in the tiger shark's cold black eyes as it locked onto her outline with undivided focus. Powerful tail beats propelled the sleek juggernaut of muscle forward in a sudden burst that left Eliza paralyzed like a gasping insect in the grip of an inescapable tractor beam. Jagged rows of awl-shaped teeth gnashed open wide as the shark slammed into her torso, driving the buoyant air tanks against her lower back with concussive force. Panic enveloped Eliza's mind in a blinding migraine as she fought to regain control of the unwieldy inertia now tumbling her into a tragic backdrop of endless black oblivion. Tiger sharks do not bite their prey so much as utilize a devastating grip and thrash technique, violently shaking their massive bodies in a death roll to slice through flesh and bone. This swiftly became Eliza's hellish reality as the nightmare jaws clamped around her right shoulder and upper back, immediately convulsing in a whiplash frenzy. Concentric rings of burning torment ricocheted inward from the excruciating wound site across her body as the shark continued its berserker velocity of side-to-side headshakes. Losing more and more comprehension of the dark surroundings with each whiplash impact, Eliza could only watch in terrifying detachment as the rhythmic thrashing steadily tore away more chunks of isolated meat and bone shards from her mangled torso. Each remittent cycle brought her deeper into shades of surreal dissociative trance, until she no longer recognized the cloud of ghostly mist dissipating around her. Despite her air tank being located in the dead zone of the shark's thrashing jaws, it still received enough scathing impacts to finally rupture. Eliza's hazed focus was jolted back, present by the stomach-dropping force field of air bubbles suddenly fountaining upwards from her shredded torso. She managed a dying glance at her dwindling depth gauge as the emergency sparged the remnants of her enriched supply in an unavoidable plume. She had no means of arresting her rapid, uncontrolled descent, as the limitations of her world imploded into the all-consuming darkness. When the body decked across the hull of the diver's support vessel hours later, its butchered condition told a gruesomely vivid tale of the tiger shark's predation. What remained of Eliza's mangled torso was hanging by a sinewy thread, with complete disarticulation of her right arm and shoulder globally. Rings of ragged trauma striped across her abdomen and suit in concentric layers of serrated precision. Though the ambush took place in an instant, the psychological toll that followed lingered for months until Eliza chose to open up publicly about her travails, recovering from the brush with the abyss. While her physical injuries would ultimately plateau short of survival, the psychological trauma refused to dissipate as easily. Night terrors of the tiger shark's cold, dead eyes fixed onto her as it thrashed her body apart like a rag doll. Unshakable panic attacks at the sound of drains or whirlpools, and a waking existence tormented by the flashbulb memories of her mind and body disassociating into an empty void of pain and severance. Eliza wondered if it was the rupturing of her final air supply that prevented the tiger from finishing the job, or if she simply expired in the pitch-black depths beforehand. Either way, the cold reality of her nighttime underwater hell left permanent scars both inside and out. But by courageously sharing her story, Eliza sparked a discourse about the real dangers posed by night diving and the equipment requirements for safely interacting with nature's nocturnal hunters. While it may always remain one of the ocean's most tantalizing frontiers, that same mystery carries profound and ever-present risks that should never be underestimated. The turquoise waters off the coast of St. Kitts shimmered on May 6, 1999. The day drew tourists, promising vibrant reefs and tropical breezes. But for Mateo Diaz, gazing out from his small cottage, the ocean was a familiar partner, where the ghosts of his past still lurked. He wasn't a tourist, drawn to the island's serenity. He had chosen this place for the solitude and the access to those hidden depths. Mateo had been a career Navy diver, serving for 25 years. He'd seen the ocean at its best and worst, from the calm, organized dives of routine maintenance work to the high-stakes, adrenaline-fueled missions he was never allowed to discuss. He was retired now, or at least he was supposed to be. The call of the sea still echoed in his blood. The years had been rough. His wife Maria had passed away 3 years prior, leaving a hollowness that nothing seemed to fill. Retirement hadn't been the golden years he'd hoped for. His memories were a jumbled mess, the triumphs alongside the missions gone tragically wrong. He'd seen firsthand what the ocean could take, and the guilt often clawed at him in the quiet hours of the night. Then, there was his grandson, Luca. Luca was the shining light in his darkening world, a bright, curious boy of 11. His visit brought Mateo out of his shell and forced him to interact with the living world again. And today was a special day. They were diving together for the first time. Luca had begged, his youthful enthusiasm infectious, and Mateo couldn't resist. As they loaded their gear onto the boat, Mateo watched his grandson with pride and apprehension. Deep down, the shadow of fear was always with him. Sharks were a fact of life in these waters, and the last thing he wanted was to expose the boy he loved to that same danger. Yet the dive was going smoothly. They stayed in shallower, calmer waters, a vibrant reef teeming with colorful fish. Mateo's job was to guide, protect, and share the underwater world's beauty with Luca. His grandson was fearless, his eyes wide with wonderment. Seeing that pure joy washed away some of Mateo's worries, almost. Below, something massive flickered under a ledge. His old instincts kicked in first, a tightening of muscles, a sense of something wrong. It took him a moment to recognize the shape lurking in the gloom, not just a shark, but a tiger shark, and a large one. He signaled sharply to Luca to resurface, his heart drumming against his ribs. Mateo moved fast, trying to put himself between Luca and the shark. He knew how unpredictable tigers could be, prone to aggression. But the shark didn't circle or hesitate. It surged up from the depths, its massive body propelling it with shocking speed. Luca didn't see it coming. One moment, he gazed at a sea turtle. The next, a monstrous shape engulfed him. Mateo reached out, a desperate, futile grab as Luca vanished within the shark's jaws. There was a muffled scream, a flash of red in the water. Then the shark was gone, leaving Luca in its wake, his body mangled and eerily still. Mateo's world imploded. Time seemed to move slowly as he reached his grandson, ignoring the danger of knowing the shark could return. He pulled Luca to the surface, the boy's face slack, his eyes staring sightlessly at the sky. A scream tore from Mateo's throat, a raw sound he didn't recognize as his own. Distantly, he registered the boat speeding towards them, the horrified faces of the crew. They got Luca to shore, but it was already too late. The paramedics tried desperately, but the damage was too severe. His beautiful, lively grandson was simply gone. Mateo collapsed on the sand, the world a blur of faces and shouts that meant nothing. His fault. He should have never brought the boy here or let him out of sight. Grief wasn't a strong enough word for the emotion ripping through him. They took him to the hospital and insisted on sedating him. He fought them, needing that sharpness of pain, the punishment he deserved. Maria's face flashed through his mind, filled with accusation. He'd failed to protect her when illness took her, and now he'd failed Luca. He was cursed, destined to drag everything he loved into darkness. They sent him home in a daze, the house on the island suddenly echoing with unbearable emptiness. Neighbors came by offering the usual platitudes, but Mateo barely heard them. He was trapped in the endless loop of what could have been done differently, the images of the attack playing over and over in his mind. One morning he woke from a nightmare when he found a small package on his porch. Inside was a child's drawing, a colorful underwater scene with a wobbly shark bearing a friendly smile. He stared at it, confusion mingling with a pang of something warmer. He finally tracked down the origin of the package, a local school. Luca had made the drawing weeks earlier when Mateo told him about his plans to teach him to dive. Tears streamed down Mateo's face, the first he'd cried since the accident. He returned to the ocean, to the place where Luca had died. At first it was a terrifying struggle, each dive bringing back a flash of the attack. But gradually the ocean's rhythm returned to him, its silent power both frightening and strangely comforting. He began volunteering with a marine conservation group, using his Navy dive experience to assist with surveys and cleanup efforts. It wasn't a cure, but a way to channel his grief into something positive. He spoke at a fundraiser, his voice shaking slightly as he told Luca's story. It wasn't about scaring people, but reminding them that the ocean was wild, and that respect for its power was crucial. His story of love and loss resonated, and when the organizers asked him to become their spokesperson, he hesitantly accepted. It wasn't what he had envisioned for his retirement, but it was a way to honor his grandson's memory, face his fears, and fight for the world Luca had been so excited to explore. As the morning sun painted the tranquil waters of New Zealand's Bay of Islands with golden hues, David stood at the water's edge, excitement and trepidation pulsing through him. 3 years had passed since he received the devastating diagnosis of thyroid cancer. The journey he had endured since then was one of the most challenging chapters of his life. When David first heard the words, "You have cancer," his world came crashing down. The initial shock and disbelief were quickly replaced by a fierce determination to fight. With unwavering support from his family, who spared no expense to ensure he received the best treatment, David embarked on his journey to beat the disease. The treatment process was grueling, marked by rounds of chemotherapy and radiation therapy that left him feeling weak and exhausted. There were days when David questioned whether he had the strength to continue, but the thought of his loved ones and the promise of a future free from cancer propelled him forward. Through it all, Davide's family remained his unwavering pillars of strength. Their love and support never wavered, their unwavering belief in his ability to conquer cancer serving as a constant source of inspiration. Together they weathered the storm, navigating the highs and lows of Davide's cancer journey with unwavering determination. As the months turned into years, Davide began to notice minor signs of progress. The side effects of treatment began to subside, replaced by glimmers of hope for a cancer-free future. With each follow-up appointment, Davide received encouraging news, reaffirming his belief that victory was within reach. And then, one fateful day, David received the news he had longed to hear. After 3 long years of battling one of the most dreaded diseases known to man, he was declared cancer-free. The weight of those words lifted a burden from David's shoulders, filling him with an overwhelming sense of gratitude and relief. So Davide and the other swimmers waded into the cool embrace of the bay. Cheers and applause echoed from the shore, a chorus of encouragement fueling their determination. With each stroke, David felt a sense of purpose coursing through him, his heart set on making a difference for those battling the same disease he had overcome. As David swam, his mind raced with thoughts of the individuals whose lives would be impacted by the funds raised from the charity swim. He thought of the families struggling to afford medical treatments, the patients awaiting life-saving surgeries, and the researchers tirelessly working to find a cure. With each stroke, he hoped to inspire others to fight their battles and contribute to the cause that had given him a second chance at life. The first leg of the journey passed without incident, the rhythmic motion of arms and legs propelling the swimmers forward through the crystal-clear waters. But as they reached the midway point, the unexpected happened. The unsuspecting swimmers noticed nothing, but suddenly, with a thunderous splash, a mako shark breached the water, its sleek form slicing through the waves with terrifying speed. Panic rippled through the group as Davide felt a searing pain shoot through his leg, the jaws of the predator clamping down with unforgiving force. In that moment of chaos, Davide's training kicked in. Despite the shock and pain, he remained remarkably calm, his instincts guiding him through the crisis. With swift movements, he fought against the shark's relentless grip, summoning every ounce of strength he possessed. Meanwhile, spectators watched in horror on the shore as the scene unfolded. Emergency responders sprang into action, rushing to assist the injured swimmer. The air was urgent as they worked tirelessly to ensure David's safety. Through sheer determination and courage, David freed himself from the shark's grasp, and his adrenaline-fueled efforts saved him from further harm. With the help of the rescue team, he was swiftly brought back to shore, where he was met with a wave of relief and gratitude from his fellow swimmers and supporters. Despite the harrowing ordeal, David remained undeterred in his mission. As he was tended to by medical professionals, his thoughts turned once again to the cause he had championed. Though his body may have been injured, his spirit remained unbroken. In the aftermath of the incident, news of David's bravery spread far and wide, inspiring countless individuals to join the fight against cancer. Though marred by unexpected adversity, the charity swim proved to be a resounding success, surpassing all expectations in terms of funds raised and awareness generated. As Davide recovered from his injuries, he found solace in knowing his actions had made a difference. The crystal-clear waters surrounding Petit St. Vincent Island shimmered with brilliant turquoise hues as the Caribbean sun glinted across the surface. Below, an intricate labyrinth of vibrant coral reefs and submerged rock formations provided an oasis of life for the abundant tropical fish darting through the vivid crevices. Despite growing up amid the stunning natural scenery, 16-year-old Jesse was always eager to explore the island's submarine wonderland, whenever he could strap on his mask, snorkel, and fins. On this particular morning, he grabbed his spear gun as well, in hopes of cleanly capturing a few fish for an upcoming family cookout. After paddling his small boat towards one of the shallower reef flats, Jesse secured the anchor and slipped beneath the waves, exhaling a stream of bubbles as he submerged into the liquid otherworld. Beneath him, fans of neon sponges and delicate anemones swayed in the gentle currents, while schools of iridescent fish scattered from the intrusion. Making his way through the maze of brain coral and twisted elkhorn, Jesse's eyes locked onto a plump spadefish casually grazing along a protruding ledge. He carefully drew back the elastic band of his spear gun, sighting the fish before squeezing the trigger and releasing the metal shaft with a heavy thunk of compressed air. The spear rocketed towards its target, striking home and sending up a cloudy stream of bubbles and fragments as the impaled spadefish thrashed wildly before going still. Jesse allowed the frenzied white cloud to dissipate before propelling himself forward in pursuit of the impaled fish, hoping to cause minimal damage. Completely focused on the blood trail bubbling from the motionless spadefish, Jesse's senses became intensely honed on retrieving his prize. So much so that his peripheral vision completely missed the massive shadowy figure emerging from the depths until it was nearly too late. Without warning, a 12-foot bull shark materialized like a torpedo directly beneath Jesse as he hovered over the stilled spadefish. The normally solitary and placid shark had been drawn to the eruption of activity from the spearfishing and activated into a predatory frenzy from the billowing cloud of fishy blood and viscera. Jesse had only a split second to register the oncoming wall of gnashing teeth before the shark slammed into his body from below, carrying him back several feet as its animalistic jaws clamped around his torso in a vice. The unimaginable pain of 1,000 serrated fangs effortlessly slicing through skin, fat and muscle radiated through Jesse's body as he reflexively gulped a lungful of seawater. The nightmarish tornado of bubbles and blood ribbons completely obscured his vision as the thrashing shark began violently whipping its head side to side in an attempt to rip its prey apart. He could feel multiple ribs snap like twigs from the vicious sawing as every jagged row of teeth cleaved deeper into his body cavity. At one point, Jesse's mask was torn from his face as the serrated teeth split his cheeks from jaw to nose, shredding flesh away up to the bone. He instantly squeezed his remaining good eye shut against the searing saltwater torrent now flooding his shredded face, as his other orbit dangled limp in a mess of optic nerves and vitreous fluid. Despite the explosive violence racking his body, Jesse managed to keep his wits and weighted buoyancy belt secure enough to avoid being dragged away into the oblivion of open waters. Still, the creature's relentless ferocity showed no sign of waning as it battered him about like a rag doll caught in a poacher's snare, imprisoning him within its impervious cone of death. As a frigid numbness began to overtake his fading consciousness, Jesse managed to kick free one final time before involuntarily blacking out, enabling him to shoot backward directly into the razor-sharp branches of the reef. He helplessly slammed into the jagged coral at full velocity as the lifeless weight of his body crashed down atop the calcified blades and fractures. Though the impact knocked the wind from his remaining lung, Jesse's limp body tumbled safely back towards the shallows as the frustrated shark lost interest and disappeared into the depths, forced to tolerate the inedible scraps forfeited during the ambush. By the time he was pulled ashore by the first responders summoned from screams carrying across the beach, Jesse had nearly been drained entirely of his life's blood. His tattered form clung to the final threads of viability, riddled with lacerations, punctures, and compound fractures stemming from the shark's relentless assault, followed by the excruciating collisions with the reef. Faced with the gruesome disfigurement, the emergency physicians had to take drastic measures to stabilize his plummeting vital signs. Jesse's savaged right eye required complete enucleation, while his ruined abdomen necessitated removing the damaged portions of his liver and intestines that had been shredded beyond salvaging. The extensive reconstructive efforts to reattach his face and jaw left him forever scarred, but ultimately successful in preventing his demise. After months of excruciating recovery, rehabilitation, and therapy, Jesse was eventually able to return to a semblance of normal life. Though the haunting memories of his violent underwater ordeal would leave him both physically and psychologically changed forever. He is no longer able to take the casual joys of fishing, swimming, or even his appearance for granted. The entire experience prompted the kind of profound perspective shift that often follows a terrifyingly close brush with death. What initially manifested as a post-traumatic aversion to the ocean gradually evolved into a deeply empathetic appreciation and protectiveness for the reasons behind the shark's primordial behavior. You see, in the years preceding Jesse's encounter, overfishing of the region's marine resources had sparked an ecological imbalance with devastating repercussions for the island's shark populations. Facing dwindling food supply from depleted fish stocks, the powerful predators were forced into scavenging closer to the coastline for any available food sources, including those being actively pursued by human spearfishers. With this renewed sense of purpose, Jesse committed himself to the cause of restoring sustainable fisheries and healthy marine ecosystems to ensure the island's sharks could return to their rightful place in the offshore food chain. Through extensive collaboration between local conservation groups, governments, and the communities directly impacted, a multi-pronged plan was established. Though the scars and missing pieces Jesse carried would forever represent a permanent reminder of that fateful day underwater, he took immense pride in having helped facilitate a collaborative solution to restore the balance between species. Because the path forward required understanding and compromise on both sides of the delicate marine symbiosis, not adversarial retaliation or misguided culling. As for the spadefish, it too was rescued from the coral where it remained pierced and given new life swimming among a revitalized reef ecosystem. The Palawan Islands shimmered, a jewel set in the heart of the Philippines. In the turquoise waters of El Nido, Anya Cruz found her calling, or perhaps more accurately, her calling found her. She was barely 10 when a local fisherman took her snorkeling on a healthy reef. Underneath the dappled sunlight, an entire world opened up, a kaleidoscope of colors and creatures more fantastical than any fairy tale. There was magic here, life woven into coral. On July 15, 2007, it ignited a spark in her that still burns bright. Now, in her early 20s, Anya wasn't just drawn to the reef's beauty, but their fragility. Coral bleaching and illegal fishing ravaged the rich ecosystem she'd grown up with. Her parents, while proud of her passion, had hoped for a more conventional life for their daughter. She'd wanted that too, once. University, a safe career. But the ocean's silent crisis gripped her, and she found herself back in El Nido, launching a modest restoration project. It was grassroots, funded with donations, and run with the help of sympathetic locals. Anya had become known in the village as a mix of respect and amusement toward this fiery young woman who spoke more passionately about corals than finding a husband. Her social media posts had given her a wider audience, attracting young activists from around the world. Her coral crusaders, she called them. This morning, she was heading out with her small team to survey one of the initial restoration sites. They'd transplanted coral fragments onto damaged reefs 2 years prior, a painstaking process. Finally, they saw encouraging growth, proving that even small efforts could make a difference. The boat motored past familiar landmarks, and the thrill of anticipation bubbled up in her alongside the usual tinge of unease. The ocean was beautiful, but it held its dangers. Sharks weren't uncommon here, but encounters were rare, usually. She pulled on her dive gear, her heart a steady rhythm against her ribs. The water felt warm and welcoming on her skin as she slid in, descending slowly. Below, a miracle was unfolding. The restored patch of the reef was alive, corals now reaching out like bright, hopeful hands. A sense of triumph filled her, and then she saw it. A large, sleek shape circled below in the slightly murky water. A reef shark, drawn perhaps to the increased fish activity around the revitalized reef. Her team was farther out, focused on the corals. She was alone, facing a predator. The reef shark moved with startling speed. It wasn't a testing bump like in some encounters. This was an attack. Anya froze, a split-second error she paid for dearly. It hit her from below, jaws clamping down on her legs. The shock was unimaginable, a blinding white burst of agony. Then, the pulling, the wrenching pressure as the shark thrashed, its teeth sawing into muscle and tendon. Her world was a swirl of crimson, and her muffled screams echoed in her ears. Instinct took over. She twisted and fought, kicking frantically for the surface. It seemed to last forever, that terrible journey back into the light, her vision blurring with pain. Then finally hands were grabbing her and she heard shouts above the panicked roaring in her ears. The boat, the terrified faces of her team hauling her on board. Then darkness mercifully descended. She woke in a dingy hospital room on the mainland. Anya's leg was heavily bandaged, an unsettling emptiness where her foot should be. The surgeon had been grimly realistic. The damage was too extensive. Amputation below the knee had been the only option to save her life. Shock, followed by despair, washed over her. Once vital for her work in the ocean, her body seemed broken beyond repair. Her parents rushed to her side, grief and guilt mingling in their eyes. Maybe somewhere deep down, Anya blamed herself too. She'd ignored the risks for too long, driven by the urgent need to save the reefs. But now what? Was her fight over? Then the unexpected twist. A photo of her in the boat, leg hastily bandaged, went viral. The story accompanying it wasn't just about the shark attack. It was about the work she was doing, the reason she'd been in the water in the first place. Suddenly, the world became interested in coral reefs and the young woman who'd nearly died for them. Donations poured into her small organization. Messages of support flooded in from around the globe, many from fellow environmentalists facing their dangers on the front lines of conservation. Anya was simultaneously humbled and galvanized. Her injury, terrible as it was, had become a tragic spotlight on a much bigger issue. When she was well enough, she spoke to the media, not about the attack but the ocean's plight. She refused to be just a victim. The footage of the thriving restoration site was shared alongside the warnings about overfishing and acidification, issues that usually seem distant and dry in news feeds. But with Anya's story, with the image of her on the boat seared into people's minds, it suddenly became real. Her recovery was slow and painful. Adjusting to her prosthetic leg took time and unwavering willpower. There were dark days, doubts gnawing at her mind. Could she get back into the water, not just to swim, but to work? But then came the letters from children, drawings of corals and sharks with messages wishing her well. Her coral crusaders swelled in number, holding fundraisers and protests. The work they had started would stay the same, not as long as they kept fighting. Anya returned to El Nido. The first time she put on her dive gear was terrifying yet exhilarating. The ocean was different now, the threat more stark, but her resolve was more robust. The world was watching, inspired and horrified by her story. Every dive and a new piece of coral planted on the reef were acts of defiance and hope that sent ripples far and wide. The late summer sun blazed overhead as Brad gunned the throttle of his bright yellow jet ski, sending them launching across the sparkling turquoise waters off Galveston's West Beach. His wife Tricia clung tightly to his waist as they crested over the boat's wakes and swells, howling with exhilaration at every airborne jump. They had dropped the kids off with grandparents for the weekend to celebrate Brad's 35th birthday, with some jet skiing in the open waters around the Galveston Island State Park. Few other watercraft dotted the vast expanse as they raced parallel to the distant shoreline, feeling completely liberated amid the endless ocean. After nearly an hour of full-throttle adrenaline riding, Brad gradually slowed their pace to an idling crawl, allowing them to catch their breath from the windy rushes. Tricia playfully splashed water from behind before planting a salty kiss on the back of Brad's neck and nuzzling against his slick skin. The roar of the jet ski engine echoed over the vast expanse of the Gulf as they sped through the open waters. Her voice cut through the noise, carrying excitement as she remarked on the solitude they enjoyed that day. With a pause in the journey, she suggested a break, a chance to immerse themselves in the refreshing waters and escape the heat of the day. Brad didn't need to be asked twice. He killed the engine as they rolled to a gentle bobbing stop atop the mild swells, with nothing but vast seascapes extending out in every direction, miles from any other signs of life. Tricia slipped off the jet ski first, gripping the attached rear security line as she allowed the weightless freedom of treading water to alleviate her aching muscles. Brad quickly followed suit, dropping backward into the refreshing bath with an invigorating yelp. Bobbing contently beside the anchored jet ski, the couple enjoyed the silence and serenity of the open waters for nearly half an hour, laughing and splashing like kids again. But their tranquil float wouldn't last. With no warning, a concussive blow slammed against the underside of the jet ski, sending it lurching upwards. Tricia instinctively grabbed the security line to brace herself while Brad was forcibly launched a few feet away with a grunt. Tricia yelled out in confusion as she steadied herself against the rocking. She asked Brad if they hit something, but before Brad could respond, his eyes came into horrifying contact with the massive pale silhouette emerging directly toward them from below. Like a massive guided missile calibrated for its mark, a 10-foot-long bull shark powered itself vertically out of the depths, its gaping serrated jaws unhinged and inhaling gallons of water with every yard it propelled upwards. Brad could only manage a feeble curse under his breath before the shark's impact. The rushing shark's entire bulk slammed into Brad at full speed, its cavernous jaws clamping down across the lower half of his body with terrifying force. In one pulverizing instant, Tricia's mind was blitzed by the concussive eruption of thrashing water and crimson spray as the rampaging shark violently engulfed her husband's figure. His agonized howls barely registered over her own shrill cries of terror. Sickening crunch after crunch resounded in sputtering bursts as the bull shark's thrashing ripped deeper into Brad's abdomen and obliterated his pelvis with horrific ease. His nerve endings were seared from the trauma until the white-hot sensations of searing muscle and crushed bones abruptly flatlined into a dull, pure shock. What followed was straight out of Tricia's most horrific nightmares as the rogue shark continued shaking its head back and forth, further separating flesh from bone and tendon. With each emphatic whiplash, bits and pieces of Brad's dismembered body spiraled away in tattered streamers across the blood-soaked waters. Within chilling moments, Tricia was left watching helplessly as her husband's obliterated remains were scattered to the hungry ocean currents. As swiftly as the fevered ambush occurred, The bull shark vanished back into the depths with one final defiant swish of its thick tail. 5 hours had passed before Galveston authorities first suspected anything out of the ordinary had transpired near Galveston Island State Park. That's when Brad's drifting disabled jet ski was finally spotted by an offshore fishing trawler, with zero trace of the owners on board. An intensive recovery and investigation followed, but ultimately, only scraps of chewed clothing and shredded personal effects were all that remained of Brad and his ill-fated birthday celebration weekend away. The downright surgical nature of the dissections told the gruesome story of a savage bull shark massacre in the remote waters. It was then that the authorities saw Tricia floating helplessly and distraught on her jet ski. She was immediately rescued by the authorities and brought aboard their ship. She didn't say a word nor talk to anyone as they sped towards the shore. Such incidents tend to incite knee-jerk public outcry and hysteria. But Brad's widow Tricia was determined his tragedy would prompt real solutions rather than overcorrections. She bravely channeled her grief into activism, lobbying local Gulf Coast communities to implement new safety guidelines for offshore recreation. Thanks to Tricia's tireless efforts, permanent marker buoys were established along designated corridors for jet skis, watercraft, and small vessels to operate safely apart from migratory shark feeding zones. She also facilitated updated guide maps highlighting potential hazard areas for specific times of year when bull shark activity was known to peak. While nothing could undo her family's unimaginable loss, Tricia took solace in knowing Brad's death was awakening revamped education around ocean conservation and shark safety for years to come. Rather than seek retaliation against the apex predators simply exhibiting their instinctual behaviors, the more prudent path involved coexistence with reasonable precautions in place. The Richards family eagerly anticipated their annual beach vacation. This cherished tradition transported them from their landlocked city of Denver, Colorado, to the sun-kissed shores of a coastal paradise. Among them, Sarah bubbled with unparalleled excitement, her anticipation palpable as they embarked on the long journey to the coast. As they traversed miles of asphalt, memories of their inaugural beach trip 6 years prior flooded Sarah's mind. It felt like just yesterday when they first dipped their toes into the ocean's embrace, a momentous occasion in their family's collective memory. In the intervening years, life had unfolded in its unpredictable tapestry, weaving threads of joy and sorrow into their familial fabric. Yet through it all, they remained steadfast, weathering storms and basking in moments of triumph. For Mr. and Mrs. Richards, this annual pilgrimage was a beacon of joy, a respite from the rigors of daily life. Their children, Sarah and Fred, had blossomed over the years, with Fred now a college student unable to join them on this excursion. Still, the familial bond remained unyielding, anchoring them amidst the ebb and flow of time. Upon arrival at the beach, they savored a leisurely meal, their senses tantalized by the salty tang of sea air and the rhythmic lullaby of crashing waves. As they reclined, surveying the bustling scene before them, a mosaic of vibrant umbrellas and carefree laughter greeted their gaze. The shoreline teemed with tourists, each seeking solace in embracing nature's splendor. For Sarah, the beach held an allure unlike any other, a playground of endless possibilities where the world's cares seemed to recede with each foamy tide. With each grain of sand beneath her feet, she felt a sense of liberation, a freedom unfettered by the constraints of everyday life. Here, amidst the sun-drenched expanse, she found sanctuary, a sanctuary she longed to revisit year after year. Being a spirited teenager with an insatiable curiosity, Sarah eagerly donned her snorkeling gear, ready to plunge into the azure depths that beckoned her. Despite her parents' cautionary warnings echoing in her ears, the allure of the ocean proved irresistible, drawing her further away from the bustling crowds of the beach in search of a secluded sanctuary. As she submerged beneath the surface, the world above dissolved into a distant memory, replaced by an underwater paradise. Enveloped by the cool embrace of the sea, Sarah marveled at the kaleidoscope of colors that danced before her eyes. Coral reefs swaying in the gentle current, schools of fish darting to and fro in a synchronized ballet. Yet amidst the tranquility, an ominous undercurrent tugged at Sarah's senses. a subtle foreboding that whispered of unseen dangers lurking in the shadows. Ignoring the gnawing unease, she pressed on, her curiosity serving as both compass and catalyst for her exploration. Then, as she ventured deeper into the heart of the cove, fate reared its fickle head, delivering a swift and merciless blow that shattered the illusion of serenity. A searing pain lanced through Sarah's leg, a visceral reminder of her vulnerability in the face of nature's unforgiving grip. Startled and disoriented, she recoiled in shock, her gaze locking onto the fleeting silhouette of a reef shark, its predatory instincts awoken by the scent of blood. With adrenaline coursing through her veins, Sarah fought to quell the rising panic that threatened to engulf her. Desperate to escape the jaws of danger, she propelled herself toward the safety of open waters, every stroke a testament to her sheer will to survive. Yet the venomous sting of the shark's bite had already begun to take its toll, its toxic tendrils infiltrating her bloodstream with each passing second. As she struggled to stay afloat, darkness descended like a shroud, blurring the edges of her consciousness into a hazy abyss. With each labored breath, Sarah's strength waned, her limbs growing heavy with the weight of impending oblivion. In a final, desperate bid for salvation, she summoned her remaining reserves of energy, propelling herself towards the distant shoreline, where life beckoned with tantalizing urgency. Mercifully, fellow swimmers' vigilant eyes caught Sarah's limp form drifting towards the shore, a harbinger of tragedy amidst the idyllic backdrop of sun and sand. They sprang into action with practiced efficiency, pulling her from the clutches of the sea's embrace and onto the safety of solid ground. Yet, even as hands pressed against her chest in a frantic rhythm, willing life back into her fragile form, Sarah's spirit had already embarked on its final voyage, drifting beyond the veil of mortal existence. Meanwhile, Mr. Richards' anticipation turned to mild concern as Sarah failed to return from her snorkeling adventure. Initially dismissing the notion of danger, they meandered along the shoreline, scanning the horizon for any sign of their adventurous daughter. It wasn't until the commotion drew their attention, a gathering of onlookers clustered around a figure lying motionless on the sand, that their hearts skipped a beat. With a sense of dread creeping into their hearts, they hastened towards the scene. Their worst fears were confirmed as they beheld Sarah's pale form amidst the crowd. Hours later, in the antiseptic confines of a hospital room, Sarah stirred from the depths of unconsciousness, her groggy senses slowly returning to her. The toxic remnants of the shark's venom had been purged from her system, replaced by the steady drip of life-saving medication coursing through her veins. News of the shark attack rippled through the coastal community like a tidal wave, sparking a flurry of speculation and concern. Amidst the chaos, authorities mobilized to investigate the incident, enlisting the aid of marine biologists and conservationists to unravel the enigma of the once peaceful cove. As the truth began to surface, it became clear that beneath the tranquil facade lurked a hidden realm teeming with life, a sanctuary for juvenile sharks seeking refuge from the tumult of the open ocean. For years, this delicate ecosystem had remained shrouded in secrecy, its inhabitants navigating unseen and unchecked depths. The revelation served as a sobering reminder of humanity's tenuous relationship with the natural world. No longer could they afford to ignore the interconnectedness of all living things, nor the consequences of their actions on the fragile balance of life. Through education and advocacy, they sought to foster a deeper understanding and appreciation for the wonders of the sea, forging a path towards a more sustainable future for generations to come.